the Longest Ballot Committee told prospective candidates that they didn't have to worry about collecting signatures because the Longest Ballot Committee already had collected the 100 or more signatures needed for them to get onto the ballot. Isn't that true?
No, that's not true. You have that a little bit backwards. So we recruit candidates, we get all their names, and then we collect signatures for them. We're not like just collecting signatures for people who said they don't want to run.
So this is you. We see where the candidate's name is on the nomination form with signatures. The candidate's name is blank. So that's precisely what you were doing, was going out and collecting signatures, getting electors to sign blank nomination forms, not candidate nomination forms.
That is not accurate.
Well, I just present you with evidence, documentary evidence, that establishes that, in fact, it is accurate. And I want to caution you, sir, but you're testifying before a parliamentary committee, and you have an obligation to answer my questions fully and truthfully. And if you fail to do so, sir, you can be held in contempt of Parliament. And I want to make clear to you that I will not hesitate in using all of the tools available to hold you accountable should you not provide truthful and accurate answers, which up till now you have not. So I'm going to give you one last opportunity to confirm on the record that you went about collecting signatures from electors where the candidate's name was blank. That's what you did, right?
No, that is not accurate. If you would give me a chance to actually respond, you've made quite a few incorrect assumptions here. Where would you like me to begin? With the AI doctored images or with your misunderstanding of what sign up means? This is very straightforward. You have it kind of mixed up. If you want to talk about those AI manipulated photos, I'm happy to do so.
These are
honorable, and to accuse a member of Parliament of doctoring images, I think you should tread very carefully in that. I don't know about these images, but I'm giving you a warning in terms of, I don't find it funny, sir. I don't think you should find it funny either. Mr. Cooper is correct in what Parliament can do, and perhaps you don't have respect for the individuals sitting at these chairs. Please have respect for the institution and the electors that put us here. Please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I always appreciate hearing from Canadians, particularly those who think we shouldn't have politicians making laws. They think that other people should be making laws other than people who are actually elected and accountable and re-accountable to the electorate. I fail to see the logic, to be quite frank with you, given the fact, as my colleague Mr. Jackson said, even when the Liberals had a majority in 2015 to 2019 and proposed electoral reform, the Canadian public actually, through their elected representatives, decide whether or not something is going to be palatable. And that's how we actually go through the sausage-making effort of making laws, regulations, including laws regarding our elections being at this particular committee. Anybody with a basic understanding of a civics class would know that. But I'm going to ask my first question to Mr. Lowen.
To order. Welcome to meeting number 5 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 sub 3, the committee is meeting in public on the actions of the Longest Ballot Committee in recent Canadian elections. To Mr. Szuchewycz.
Okay, members of PROC, given your mandate of reviewing both election law and conflicts of interest, it is extremely wise of you to take the time to investigate what the Longest Ballot Committee is all about. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my appearance today, it's that democracy is best managed with strict, nonpartisan impartiality. So while you consider that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all the candidates who put their names forward to run in long ballots. And I want to give a huge thank you to all the voters who signed their names hundreds of times in support of those candidates and in support of electoral reform. Because of them, this protest has been successful beyond anything I honestly could have ever imagined. And now clearly we have the attention of politicians. Because I've been invited to Parliament today because they hear our message. They hear our shared desire for improving democracy. So I want to start with praise for two Canadian institutions. Elections Canada is admired for its professionalism and independence. We voters know that we are able to cast our votes and that everyone running the polling station is impartial and our votes will be counted fairly. Elections Canada is actually one of the most trusted government institutions in our nation, and that trust is deserved. Elections Canada is trusted precisely because it is nonpartisan and independent. The same is true of our electoral boundary commissions. In many places around the world, politicians actually decide their own districts. And what do? They gerrymander maps to try to lock in their own power. Canada wisely does not tolerate that. Instead, boundary drawing is the responsibility of independent commissions operating at arm's length from Parliament. So here's the problem. While ballot counting and boundary drawing are correctly protected from political interference, the rules of our election are not. The laws that govern how parties are regulated, how ballots are designed, about who's even allowed to put their name forward as a candidate, and about how votes get translated into seats. These laws are all still written and modified by you, MPs, with your partisan interests and with your careers actually depending on the outcome of each election. This is a textbook conflict of interest, obviously. The Longest Ballot Committee advocates that you MPs recuse yourselves from writing the rules of your own elections. We already know that the model of nonpartisan independence works. Canadians would be well served by a permanent, independent, nonpartisan body to oversee the full framework of election law. This reform would also protect you as MPs. When you propose changes to election law, you are often met with suspicion, and rightly so. Even good reforms can be dismissed as self-serving when they are written by people who are perceived to benefit from the changes. By handing responsibility to an independent, nonpartisan body, voters could finally trust that the laws were written to serve the best interests of Canadians, rather than to serve the best interests of the ruling parties. The Longest Ballot Committee is urging MPs to do the right thing and recuse yourselves from this blatant conflict of interest and establish a permanent, independent, nonpartisan body to oversee the full framework of election law. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thank you to both witnesses for being under your 5-minute allotment. Mr. Cooper, we'll turn to you for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Szuchewycz, you have operated as a key organizer for the Longest Ballot Committee and served as the official agent for many of the candidates affiliated with the Longest Ballot Committee, correct?
That is correct.
And your brother, Kieran Szuchewycz, also is an organizer with the Longest Ballot Committee, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I want to ask you some questions about the recruitment of candidates and the collection of nomination signatures for the Longest Ballot Committee. When you and other organizers from the Longest Ballot Committee were collecting signatures, at times electors would have been presented with multiple nomination forms to sign simultaneously.
That's correct.
Okay. And as you went about collecting signatures and recruiting candidates, the Longest Ballot Committee told prospective candidates that they didn't have to worry about collecting signatures because the Longest Ballot Committee already had collected the 100 or more signatures needed for them to get onto the ballot. Isn't that true?
No, that's not true. You have that a little bit backwards. So we recruit candidates, we get all their names, and then we collect signatures for them. We're not like just collecting signatures for people who said they don't want to run.
So I have a video
Okay.
that you posted on YouTube to the Longest Ballot Committee on August 18th, 2024, in respect of the LaSalle-Imard-Verdun by-election, in which you state that If we're going to break the record for the longest ballot, we need everyone to sign up as soon as possible. We've already collected 100 nomination signatures for you. All you have to do is follow the instructions. So, in fact, you and other organizers for the Longest Ballot Committee were going around with nomination forms that didn't have candidates' names on them. Isn't that correct?
That is not correct.
I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Szuchewycz, because I have a tweet that was posted by the Longest Ballot Committee on January 22nd, 2024, of you, of Kieran, and of I believe, a Glenn McDonald.
Yeah.
And when you look more closely, this is you. We see where the candidate's name is on the nomination form with signatures. The candidate's name is blank. So that's precisely what you were doing, was going out and collecting signatures, getting electors to sign blank nomination forms, not candidate nomination forms.
That is not accurate.
Well, I just presented you with evidence, documentary evidence, that establishes that, in fact, it is accurate. And I want to caution you, sir, but you're testifying before a parliamentary committee, and you have an obligation to answer my questions fully and truthfully. And if you fail to do so, sir, you can be held in contempt of Parliament. And I want to make clear to you that I will not hesitate in using all of the tools available to hold you accountable should you not provide truthful and accurate answers, which up till now you have not. So I'm going to give you one last opportunity to confirm on the record that you went about collecting signatures from electors where the candidate's name was blank. That's what you did, right?
No, that is not accurate. If you would give me a chance to actually respond, you've made quite a few incorrect assumptions here. Where would you like me to begin? With the AI doctored images or with your misunderstanding of what sign up means? So in that video, when I say sign up, what I'm referring to is that these are candidates who have already expressed that they want to run. We then collected their signatures with the candidate name at the top. Obviously, that's the rule.
It's not at the top.
It was at the top. I was there.
Yes, it was not at the top.
And then when we say we already have your signatures, you need to finish signing up, that is referring to fill out your forms, book an appointment with the returning officer to do your declaration. This is very straightforward. You have it kind of mixed up. If you want to talk about those AI manipulated photos, I'm happy to do so.
I don't have anything mixed up. What I have are
respectfully, you do have that mixed up.
A YouTube video.
If I can for a moment, Mr. Szuchewycz.
Yeah.
We operate here on a position that members of Parliament are honourable, and to accuse a member of Parliament of doctoring images, I think you should tread very carefully in that. I don't know about these images, but I'm giving you a warning in terms of, I don't find it funny, sir. I don't think you should find it funny either. Mr. Cooper is correct in what Parliament can do, and perhaps you don't have respect for the individuals sitting at these chairs. Please have respect for the institution and the electors that put us here. Sorry, Mr. Cooper. I think we stopped about 30 seconds.
Yeah,
no. We have never collected signatures with blank candidate names. The Chief Electoral Officer has already testified to you that there's no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
The Chief Electoral Officer in his testimony said that your committee initially got caught doing precisely just that. That was his testimony.
Respectfully, Mr. Chair, that it was not his testimony. His testimony was that we collected without an identified candidate, which is true. We wrote all candidates were in the candidate field, and we got people to decide. We said, would you be willing to nominate any and all candidates?
That's what you did. You just admitted it.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you.
Chair. Just to confirm with you, Mr. Szuchewycz, in your submission to the committee, it said that whoever wrote the submission, I'm not sure if that was you, said that they watched the testimony from the Chief Electoral Officer last week. So just wanting to confirm if that was you that authored that document or not, and did you watch the Chief Electoral Officer's testimony last week?
Yeah, my brother and I wrote that document. And yeah, I watched the testimony last week.
Okay, so you'll have seen then that the Chief Electoral Officer testified last week that your actions in various constituencies, whether it be general or by-election, affect every voter's access to vote, but the actions of your organization particularly hurt and block the ability of seniors and folks with disabilities to be able to cast their ballot. Those who are born with additional needs and the seniors who built this country should not have barriers put in their way by a political stunt that has no motivation or request from the public to change our electoral system. So what kind of an organization would try to prevent those most vulnerable in our society and our seniors from being able to access their constitutional right to vote?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's a great question. So as we all know, the design of federal ballots is prescribed by the Election Act, which is written by you MPs. So I'm not aware of any documented cases of people actually being prevented from voting because of too many candidates. I am aware of existing accessibility concerns surrounding the voting process. The Canadian National Institute for the Blind gave a series of recommendations to this very committee on improving accessibility when Bill C-65 was being discussed. I would point out that none of their recommendations have been implemented by you, and I would also point out that none of their recommendations involved arbitrarily restricting citizens' rights to run as a candidate. So I'm not an expert on accessible ballot design, so I would suggest that you talk to the disability advocates for that.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think the Chief Electoral Officer has spoken to disability advocates and has heard multiple complaints. The number of complaints about this election were higher than it has been before, which was also presented as part of his testimony. So whether or not it's the end goal of your organization, this is the result that people had a more difficult time casting their ballot in this election, both in the Battle River Crowfoot by-election and in the general election, than ever before. And they were predominantly seniors who had to wait in longer lines and found the sometimes meter-long ballot more inaccessible, or people with disabilities, including, as you mentioned, people that are vision impaired. So these actions have caused people not only to be unable to wait in the line longer to vote, but also required in many cases no longer their ability to privately vote because they required assistance in the ballot box in order to manage the ballot that your organization forced to be so unwieldy that they could not manage it on their own. Why would you take these actions? And what do you have to say to those Canadians who had their privacy breached because of their inability to manage the ballot on their own because of your campaign's actions?
Mr. Speaker, I would, again, I don't design the ballots. The ballot design is written in the Elections Act, which means you MPs actually design the ballot. And if the Chief Electoral Officer was following the will of Parliament, then it actually would have been twice as long in those two-column situations. Of course, for operational reasons, understandably, he had to make emergency amendments to the Elections Act in order to not make it like 4 meters long. So yeah, if you're concerned about accessible ballot design, I strongly suggest you talk to disability advocates, because I'm not an expert on this, and I have no power to change the design of the ballot.
Well, sir, with respect, you do have the ability to stop your committee's actions from blowing up our ballots to achieve a political goal where there is no political consensus in this country to change our electoral system. The professors already noted it. You have a Liberal Party that campaigned on it in 2015 and then backed away from it because they recognized that there was no willingness to change the electoral system from anywhere near a consensus or even close to a majority of Canadians. So you're wasting everybody's time and in the process harming some of our most vulnerable Canadians' ability to participate in Canada's democracy.
Okay, I will interject there as it is 5 minutes. Perhaps Mr. Szuchewycz, 3.5 minutes, Madame Normandin.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Some questions for you, Mr. Szuchewycz, if I may. The idea behind the Longest Ballot Committee is to be militant with a view to having electoral overhaul or reform. I'd like to hear your thoughts. What's your perception about the ability of your message to actually percolate up in the public and cut through? Have your efforts really hit their mark to date?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, I think me being invited here is pretty good evidence that we've been very successful. We get lots of media attention, and just at a basic level, whenever I talk to someone and say, hey, did you know politicians write the rules of their own election? They say, oh, that's stupid. So it clicks with people right away. It's very obviously a conflict of interest.
Je vais reformuler ma question.
I'll reformulate my question, take another stab at it. Folks are aware of the existence of the Longest Ballot Committee, but in your opinion, do they really understand the message that you are championing when it comes to electoral reform?
Yeah, I think people do understand the message. It's very straightforward that politicians are obviously in a conflict of interest when they are in charge of writing the rules for their own elections. Sorry. It's a very simple message, and people understand it and generally agree with me, unless they have partisan interests.
Je comprends qu'une des façons
Now, I understand that one way of determining the success of your company or your organisation is by your presence here today. What are the other indicators as far as your message cutting through and percolating up in the public?
Like I said, we get a lot of media attention. It's really great. We get a lot of candidates putting themselves out there and doing media interviews. We've got international attention for the first person to get 0 votes in history, so that was very cool. We get lots of positive messages. People are always happy to see what we're doing, and they want to join next time. So I think it's been very positive, and people really resonate with the message that politicians shouldn't be in charge of the rules of their own elections.
Au risque de me répéter, vous l'avez mentionné.
At risk of repeating myself, you mentioned that one way of determining or calculating the success of your organisation is by way of your presence here today. Do you really get the sense that your presence here today is tangibly contributing to your demand for an overhaul of the electoral system? Or on the contrary, are you in fact discrediting this issue, which is in other respects legitimate and quite praiseworthy?
So like I was saying, people with partisan interests obviously don't want to hear that election laws should be decided by non-partisan bodies. It's great. I get to, you people are in charge of the Elections Act, and I get to be right in here in front of you and telling you, maybe you shouldn't be. This is very positive.
Mr. Chair, I always appreciate hearing from Canadians, particularly those who think we shouldn't have politicians making laws. They think that other people should be making laws other than people who are actually elected and accountable and re-accountable to the electorate. I fail to see the logic, to be quite frank with you, given the fact that, as my colleague Mr. Jackson said, even when the Liberals had a majority in 2015 to 2019 and proposed electoral reform, the Canadian public actually, through their elected representatives, decide whether or not something is going to be palatable. And that's how we actually go through the sausage-making effort of making laws, regulations, including laws regarding our elections being at this particular committee. Anybody with a basic understanding of a civics class would know that. But I'm going to ask my first question to Mr. Lowen. Thank you very much. Now to Mr. Szuchewycz. The Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Perot, told the committee that people should face penalties for signing multiple nomination papers. Would you agree with that statement?
I believe that was one of his suggestions. I don't really see a reason for that. I don't really see the logic in it. Personally, I prefer it when there's more than one candidate on the ballot. So I should be able, as a voter, to nominate more than one candidate.
You're aware that Section 480.1, subsection 1, says every person is guilty of an offense who with intent mislead falsely represents themselves to be or causes anyone to falsely represent them to be E, a candidate or a person who is authorized to act on a candidate's behalf. Would you agree that asking somebody to sign a nomination paper that has all candidates written at the top or no candidate's name would be a false representation under the Act?
No, I'm not a legal expert, but I don't believe it was. Of course, the returning officer determined that that wasn't acceptable to be, like the candidates couldn't get accepted based on those forms, and so they were refused, and that's fine.
Also in the Elections Act, Section 482.1, every person is guilty of an offense who obstructs or hinders or knowingly makes, either orally or in writing, a false or misleading statement to the Commissioner of Elections of Canada Elections or any person acting under his or her direction, while the Commissioner or the person acting under his or her direction is exercising or performing powers, duties, or functions conferred or imposed upon the Commissioner under this Act. So that's obstruction. Do you think any of the actions of your committee have actually obstructed and met the definition here for obstruction under Elections Canada? And have you been given any warnings? Have you been given any reprimands? And have you been threatened with charges by Elections Canada?
Certainly not to any of those questions. Never been reprimanded, and have no intention of misleading anyone. We have nothing to hide. We do everything by the book.
My colleague,
Thank you very much, Mr. Calkins.
Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Szuchewycz, if I may. Can you hear me? You can, good. So your actions have been described as in many different ways, in fact, and you said that you're happy to be here today and to have gotten politicians' attention. Do you really think that what you are doing is achieving your true objectives, or do you think instead that we should sit down around a table and have an in-depth, good faith discussion about what your goals are, i.e. electoral reform at the end of the day?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This committee has mandate over election law and conflict of interest. So yes, this is the perfect place for you all to be discussing whether or not it's appropriate for MPs to be writing the rules of their own elections.
C'est bon. I'm okay. It's okay.
Thank you so much, Madame Briere. I will exercise my ability as chair to ask a question, and it's picking up on what Mr. Calkins was alluding to with appointing people who would seemingly not be accountable. I know in our system, and I think you even spoke about it in terms of the Elections Canada being respected. The executive appoints a nominee to be the head of Elections Canada, and an organization that's independent like the RCMP is appointed and then is accountable to Parliament. It worries me that you're proposing an agency that may not be accountable. Who are these individuals who would be appointed to this committee? I guess is my question, if it wasn't going to be politicians or the executive who was going to make that appointment.
Yep, that's a fantastic question. I'm not a policy expert. It's very obvious to everyone that it's inappropriate for conflict of interest for MPs to be in charge of it. So I'm extremely confident that if you had an in-depth discussion about it, you could come up with something very reasonable.
So well, I guess I'll leave it as a comment that it's very bizarre to me that you're engaging in this protest without the very basic answer to the first question that would come up in solving what you are seeking to protest. But I appreciate you appearing before the committee. We will suspend for a few minutes to set up for the next panel.